American in lifestyle, global in spirit, Indian at heart. You're listening to Desi Tea Talks.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Desi Tea Talks. So last year, we all took a couple's trip to Peru. It's almost 1 year and we thought we should just talk about some of our experiences. In the interest of time, we're going to talk about Machu Picchu today. So let me start with you, Manasi. What were your first thoughts with Machu Picchu after reaching there?
Okay, so it was honestly the first thing I thought, please don't hate me, underwhelming. Okay, it was beautiful. It was absolutely stunning and gorgeous. But you know how there's such a hype built up because it's Machu Picchu. It used to be one of the wonders of the world. And I mean, it is beautiful and it's gorgeous. But I just expected so much more because everybody had built so much hype around it that, I mean, it just fell short. I honestly thought that the entire journey to get there, which was quite an interesting journey in itself, that the destination didn't quite live up to it in my personal, oh, this is it. Like, okay, that was my first thought. I mean, again, let me repeat myself by saying it was absolutely gorgeous, but it definitely fell short for me. What do you think, Aisha?
I have of the same opinion too. I know how much we prepped for the whole thing. I even carried my salwar kameez and all those jhumkis because I wanted a picture right there. All the shenanigans that we did, but again, even I was underwhelmed because I went with the whole, oh, this is the best thing I'm gonna see probably in the year. But and no offense, it was definitely a great thing. Lots to learn about the Inca civilization, but in general, it could have been more.
So Machu Picchu was on my bucket list for a very long time, since 2008, when I saw that Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull movie. I mean, I was obsessed by Peru from that movie, and then the more I read about it. But after going there, I thought it was beautiful. Like, it was the location and the view of Machu Picchu was just beautiful, majestic, and very mystical in some ways. That's what I thought. And I think another adjective that I would like to add is like breathless. And I think I would say breathless for two reasons. I mean, how often do you really stand on those Andean peaks and you're overlooking the clouds? I mean, if you're Indiana Jones, this is probably normal, but for an average person like me, I think it was very beautiful. Another reason why I call it breathless is because for all those stairs we had to walk, oh my gosh, they were steep. I literally felt like I was doing a Stairmasters workout being hungover. Like, I was tired by the time we got to the viewpoint. And I remember we got all those passes, like extra passes of going up to that, hiking up the Huayna Picchu mountain. I was like, there's no way we're going to make it there. Like, that's it. 3 hours and I was done.
Yeah, I think we definitely did not practice the walking and the running as we should have if you really wanted to climb up all the way to Huayna Picchu or anything. We definitely didn't train for it, as they call it. We're generally, healthy and fit, but I wouldn't call ourselves that athletic to be able to climb that whole Huayna Picchu. I mean, Machu Picchu was itself quite a task for us to get to.
I think it was more based on that timing because we had such less time to get into the ruins. So while booking those Huayna Picchu tickets, it felt like, oh, you could do everything in one day. But when we got there, first of all, it took so long just to get to Machu Picchu. And then you see the ruins for a couple hours and you were tired going up and down the stairs. So that was a breathless feeling right there.
I was sleepless too. I couldn't sleep in the bus or the train or anything. So of course I was sleepless, breathless and tired.
The whole journey, Parija mentioned that it took a long time to get there. And just to, we had very short time because everything was so cut to cut since we were staying in Cusco and we traveled to Machu Picchu the day of. So it was such a long journey. So we had a very short amount of time to spend that day at Machu Picchu or to be able to do other things that we could possibly have. So, but I mean, there's not a lot of accommodation options in Machu Picchu. So it wasn't something we wanted to do. We rather wanted to stay in Cusco and go to other places around there. But I do want to touch on the topic of the journey. I just wanted to mention we took 2 trains one bus. I think a total of, I want to say 5 or 6 hours of travel. Am I right, ladies?
Yeah.
And I actually do want to talk about how hard it was for you.
Oh my gosh, I remember setting up alarms like for 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. because we had to get up to be there at that bus station at like 5 something, and then a train. And then I think we crossed like 3 modes of transport in 3 different towns just to get to Machu Picchu.
Yes, and do you remember like the cab ride? We couldn't find the cab ride that night, so we had to really rush through it. And I think Manasi and I were having the panic attack that okay, there's no way we are gonna reach there. And then once we all got into the bus, everybody dozed off except for me. So I remember the trip. I remember the entire journey. I remember everything so clearly just because I was wide awake. It was fun. It was fun.
And the reason Aisha says that me and her were having a panic attack is because we are very like, we need everything to be planned. So we're planners, whereas Parija, she's more chill and laid back, and she's like, oh, it'll work itself out. And me and Aisha, no, we have to be there. If the bus is leaving at 5, we need to be there at 4:30 just to be sure. And I think we all woke each other up to make sure. We had a group going on, so we were like, oh my gosh, are you up? Like we were like, no, we have to go to Parija's room and make sure she and her husband were up, because we were just afraid that we're gonna lose it. And Aisha said we couldn't book the cab, so we had to make sure we had the cab booked that morning. And it was kind of stressful in the morning, right?
Chaotic and stressful. I remember. I don't know how many coca teas did I have that morning, just because I was panicking and I was like, at least something should keep me warm.
And then it did help, with the altitude sickness and getting up in the morning and traveling so much in the morning.
I think the train ride has to be the highlight for me, but both going up and coming down. And especially because it was after Europe that I was actually sitting in train after so long, and I just felt so great. And of course, I was carrying my tepla and all the pickles. So we had like a blast. We were having our tea. We were all 6 of us chatting, eating. It was a fun experience altogether, just going up there.
Yeah. Aisha, those teplas were really good. Thanks to you bringing that.
Yeah, because I think the train that we took to get there, they didn't have any food options or nothing sustainable. So we thought, oh, we'll just pick something on the way. So me and Parija, neither of us had planned so much. But those teplas like saved our lives. I know we always make fun of people like carrying food with them, but you know what? Sometimes it really comes in handy. And that really saved that morning, curbed that appetite, because I feel like I was always hungry. I don't know, it's maybe the altitude. It was definitely not that cold or anything, but that altitude, I don't know, it just made me really hungry. And those teplas, spot on.
I think Machu Picchu experience in general, do you remember when our tour guide was taking us to so many places? We had all 6 of us are very curious people. We had questions after questions for our tour guide. So what do you think about, in general, about Machu Picchu, what the Inca society was? Any thoughts on that, Parija?
Oh, in Machu Picchu, I think the most, like what I fell in love with were the llamas. I'm also actually sipping on in my llama cup right here. So I think like llamas are probably the most loyal residents and the biggest fans of Machu Picchu. I can say that they are bigger fans than what we were of Machu Picchu. So, but llamas, I just think are so cute and woolly. And what was interesting to me was like, because before going to Machu Picchu, I was reading all those blogs and, browsing through Instagram of what kind of pictures people take there. And it was all with the llama. So all I wanted to do was take a picture with the llama at Machu Picchu. So when I first saw, I think there were about like 24 of llamas overall, not many. And the first thing was some said it's alpacas or some said it's llama. So it got me confused there. For all the listeners who are listening this, is if you want to know the difference between alpaca and llama, please Google it because it's super amusing.
And fun fact, because Parija was so busy with the llamas and the alpacas and she was always roaming here and there, that's when we invented the hashtag, where is Parija?
Parija is notorious for getting lost. Every single trip, there's at least, if not a big scare, a little scare. Oh my gosh, we left Parija somewhere, Parija. And that obviously, most of the time, phone networks, even though all our phones, we had international calling and everything, there was like hardly any network, especially at Machu Picchu. And we were going through these ruins at one point, and we thought Parija and my husband were lagging because they were looking at something. So we thought at least, she's with somebody, so, they'll find us. And then, so we keep walking. And then suddenly my husband catches up with us. And we were like, where's Parija? And he's like, Oh, I don't know. And we had again like a small little freak out, and then she turned up like 5 minutes later. So that wasn't like a big scare, but it's pretty common that Parija gets lost.
I think I was with the llama right there. For
She
sure.
was with the llamas. I think coming down, she actually bought that scarf with the llamas that you wanted, remember?
Yes! Oh my gosh, me and Farija almost had like a fight for the first time. Well, it wasn't really a fight, but it was just like, I want that scarf. I want that scarf. We could have easily had more, but we were trying to like, negotiate with the vendors because it was street vendors. And so we didn't want to fight in front of them. I was just like, fine, Farija, but I hope to like steal it someday when I visit your house.
I know. Where is Parija hashtag and the llama scarf? That's what kept us busy in the Machu Picchu. We both were discussing a lot about how Inca culture is so particularly different.
Honestly, the biggest reason we got tour guide is because, we don't need to. It's pretty self-explanatory where you need to go anything. But the only reason all 6 of us agreed on it was because we wanted to learn about the culture and the history. And the tour guide we had, she was pretty good about giving at least the time that we had the general history, the art, explaining about the architecture a little bit and just how they lived. And it was just so interesting. And that's, I think, the biggest, like the most exciting thing for me about Machu Picchu, more than obviously its beauty. Aishwarya has a bunch of thoughts about that. What do you say, Aisha?
So I think so I'm a story buff. I just go for the stories whenever I'm visiting a place. So I was just intrigued by the fact how that civilization so old by the date, but still so progressive in its nature. So if you see, we talk a lot about the gender bias and there's like so much movement going on, equal pay, equal rights. But back then, the women were actually treated equally in the Inca civilization, something to actually learn from. I don't know what went wrong in our society eventually, but we started off pretty well when you look at all those older civilizations. Like women had their own specific roles. They had specific roles both in terms of administration and the sacred duties for the temple service. But in general, it was never about, oh, you're a woman and you're not going to do anything. And they had their own special, remember those accommodation rooms that we saw, especially when they were hitting their puberty, how they would live separately, but still learn to do the sacred service to the gods. So that was interesting for me to see. And I really enjoy picking up those stories because back in the day, we were doing pretty much fine.
I really thought that the Inca culture was so modern for that time. I mean, I remember catching this point from the guide that she said that live-in relationships was very common. I mean, it's gotten common now, especially in India. I guess it's starting to get common. But I mean, back then, I think whenever Machu Picchu was built.
Yeah, it's such an old civilization, and to learn that they were as modern as we are now, pretty shocking. I think we definitely went through like a downward path as humanity, and then we're climbing back up. It's so odd that happened, that we became prude, and then we're back again to being modern and cool about, rights and equality and things like that. It was very interesting. So I think that was the most exciting thing about going to any place, about especially older civilizations, to just learn how it was, and to, the whole point of it is you make mistakes and you learn from them. And the other cool part was just the way architecture was structured. It was all in tiers. So they had even back in the day, like the way they had it structured for drainage and stormwater. And so it was just amazingly laid out without having all the technologies that we have now. I just thought it was so interesting that being an engineer, being a civil engineer, it's just so fascinating to me about how things were built. And, they're in pretty shambles, they're in ruins, but still you could see the structure, the base, the foundation still exists because they were great architecture even back then.
Yeah, when you say how great those foundations were, sometimes when I come back from visiting such places, my immediate thought is I wish we had the wisdom of those people in the modern setup of technology. We would be doing so much better, right?
Oh yeah, I don't think you would be in a quarantine situation at all.
Because of the ruins factor, right? I remember we were trying to take a picture and we went to the other spot and the guide had to actually stop us because the ruins are so special. They do not allow you to, jump or do any kind of hard walking. Even those sticks, those hiking sticks that people normally carry, you cannot carry them in Machu Picchu. So it is actually a hard hike and a hard trip altogether in general. That's what I feel.
You know what was interesting to me regarding the architecture part are the stones that they use, like the technique of how they carried the stones and that was built. I really thought that Machu Picchu was more equipped for earthquakes than California. It really was, because I mean the way they did it, I think it was called like an ashlar technique or something like that, where the stone pieces were cut and they were actually put in like puzzles together. So that is what really holds up those 1,000-year ruins. And it was very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's still standing, so they did something right, right?
Yeah.
I think the journey to get there to me was honestly one of the most exciting things. And then the second most exciting thing was just learning about the culture and the history and the architecture of the whole thing.
My favorite part was coming back from Machu Picchu.
We were tired.
I know, but that train I thought it was such a bougie train. The glass ceiling on the train, it was just amazing. And I think we all were so tired. We chose to have some beverages, I was totally going for the pisco drink, pisco sours, I guess.
Yeah.
And lots of wine, and I think
that was the one thing, because I usually tend to fall asleep in these long journeys with trains or buses. So I was like, if you want me to stay awake, order me a glass of wine. And so it became a whole thing. We ordered one glass. It ended up being like more than one glass. And then suddenly all of us are just hanging out. And we were kind of being boisterous and loud. I feel like we would have, if they could have, they would have probably thrown us off the running train.
Yeah, I think the train was delayed by like several hours, and none of us noticed. Right after the whole day trip of Machu Picchu, we were so energetic. By the time we reached, we went to that other place to eat and hang out at the hookah parlor. Remember?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I think the whole experience, that whole day was just very memorable in a lot of different ways. It was definitely a lot of fun.
Yes, with the whole Where's Parija hashtag going on, it was definitely a fun one.
And a lot of pictures, right? I mean, I think we took so many pictures. But I mean, Machu Picchu is such a photogenic place. That's what I think. The location where it is at, and the view that you see from the viewpoint, like where you see the entire ruins just in like one glance. I think that's what makes it so beautiful.
Yeah, and fun fact, it's actually a very popular proposal destination. Look at the picture, it's so amazing.
Yeah, I know a couple of
one.
I think there was one proposal when we were at
I think so.
Right? Yeah, I remember.
It was in a different tier, but yeah, I remember because everybody started clapping. I was like, yeah, I think I remember that. So anyways, we got there, but do you want to talk about the precautions and measures we had to take to get there? Any vaccinations we took?
Yeah, everything. I think that was my first time actually going to a travel clinic. So the whole experience was different because they gave me a full brochure of things to study and prepare. Do not eat this, do not eat that, do not have ice. And like, who thinks about ice when you're traveling? Those things that naturally do not come to you. I had to do all that preparation, and I took 3 vaccinations. My husband had to take a lot more because obviously he did not get as sick as I did as a kid. So we took the yellow fever, the Hep A, Hep B, and the typhoid, and then of course the bunch of altitude sickness tablets that I was carrying across Machu Picchu.
And it was such crazy times because we were obviously all looking up what vaccinations we need to take and what we should take, and just trying to remember what we are up to date on. Trying to ask our parents, okay, do we have this record? Do we need this record? And sometimes some countries require you to have certain immunizations before you can even enter the country, or if you're coming back, the United States sometimes require you to make sure that you have those immunizations, so you're not bringing any communicable disease or anything. So we're trying to look up everything, and obviously the biggest thing for us was yellow fever. We should definitely get yellow fever. At least me and Aishwarya, we were like, since we're so particular, we're like, we need to take it. And California, for whatever reason, or I think it was all over the country, there was a shortage of this vaccine. And I was just freaking out. I was like, well, what do I do? What do I do? And I don't I didn't have a general physician at the time that I could just call and ask. I didn't have that sort of relationship. And Aishwarya was in Chicago at that time. And so she was like, she found a place, a travel clinic, and she got her shots. And then her husband, he was in California for that time, and he went somewhere and took it, and he texted us, hey, this is the place and it's in limited quantities, just go right now. And I was like, next day I was like, let's go get this shot done. And luckily we just made it, because there's a period of time, I think it's like 14 days prior to leaving, that you need to take the shot. So we literally made it the day that it was that 14-day period that we need to have had that vaccine inside of us before we could get there. I mean, just as a precaution, not that we would have gotten it for sure or anything. It wasn't a requirement. It was just a precautionary measure we chose to take.
It was a recommendation. And of course, we always follow the recommendations given to us. What about you, Parija?
Oh, I did not take anything. While you guys were, going all through, getting all these shots, I was actually busy shopping in Uniqlo. I was was actually hoping that I could find like a similar shirt for all three of us, but what ended up really happening was all our three men, all our husbands got an exact same thing from Uniqlo, that red Uniqlo
Jacket.
jackets. Yeah.
That was so funny. It was so unexpected. It wasn't planned or anything. Us three were planning to wear something,
I know.
be able to take cool pictures, and none of the husbands thought of anything. And we obviously had a whole list, and we had shopped for several like months before the trip. But our husbands went pretty much last minute. Of like, I'm gonna get the first jacket, and I see, and literally all three of them got the same red colored jacket from Uniqlo. What are the chances? Well, I mean, pretty high. It's one store.
And the guys to shop and they pick up the first thing and come back home, right?
Pretty much. That's how my husband works for sure.
No, I did not take any shots. Only because I had taken a yellow fever shot like about 9 years ago when I went to Nigeria. So apparently it lasts for 10 years. So I was like, good thing.
Yeah, and that was the other thing about the yellow fever shot, because some vaccines, there's different versions of it where some are for 10 years and then some are for a lifetime, because I think the one that me and Aishwarya and our husbands took are for a lifetime.
Yeah.
So it depends on the strand you use or certain kinds you use, but it's more of a precautionary measure, because I asked a few people, did you take it? And a lot of people that I spoke to had taken it at some point in their life, so they were not as worried. So it was just a safe thing. And now we're, we had plans to travel this year and next year. So we figured, it'll come in handy anyways. And then obviously COVID happened and we're stuck at home. But it's just something good to have. And I would highly recommend getting a shot if you're planning to go to Peru or any of these areas.
Yeah, but Peru in general, Machu Picchu, and how, especially the whole experience was so great. Food was nice.
I'd like to mention about food is that if you think you've eaten Peruvian food, for example, in the States or like somewhere else, and you think that's Peruvian food, go to Peru. You don't get anything like that. It's honestly relatively pretty bland, because you get all these sauces here and it's spicy, or you can make have them make it spicy, but yeah, it's not the same at all. Just I'm gonna leave it at that note.
Yeah, I think I'm craving for some Peruvian food, so I better order that in tonight.
I'm craving Inca Cola. Too bad that you don't get it everywhere.
Yeah, that was a good beverage.
Yeah. Okay, ladies, let's get back to our Peruvian food tonight. Like, there's a lot of food that we ate. I think we have to cover it in another episode some other time, because we have to talk about Lima and the Amazon and the Paracas. So lots going on. And of course, we're going to talk about your Argentina experience, Manasi. All right, guys, that is it for this episode. We'll come back with more stories next time. But if you want to hear more about our Machu Picchu experience, leave us a comment. You can always send us an email. It's daisyteatalks@gmail.com. Subscribe to our channel, hit the like button. It's Daisy Tea Talks on YouTube, Daisy Tea Talks on Instagram and Facebook as well. And we'll see you next time.